Digital Devil Story 2, Warrior of the Demon City, is the sequel to the original Megami Tensei novel, both written by Japanese novelist Aya Nishitani. I did a video on the first book at the end of last year, which I really suggest you watch if you haven't already, as this book picks up right where the last one left off. Also, if you're new around here, or you just keep getting suggested my videos and watching them because they look cool, then why not subscribe? I have a lot more Megami Tensei videos on the way, and I'm sure that anyone in the gaming space will find some of my other videos to be interesting as well, even if not all of them. I hope that you stick around, and with that, let's move on to Tokyo. For those who are unaware, these books predate the existence of Megami Tensei as a video game franchise, and are the original form of what would eventually become the series we know and love today. It follows Japanese high school students Akemi Nakajima and Yumiko Shirisagi, reincarnations of the Japanese creator gods Izanagi and Izanami, who accidentally summoned and then killed the demon Loki, who I also released a video about not that long ago. This book tells us a lot more about the world the novels take place in. The characters use the words Asaya and Atziluth to discuss the human and demon worlds respectively. These names come from Jewish Kabbalah, describing where a world falls on the scale of material to divinity, with the human world being the most created, least divine world, and Atziluth being the most divine, falling right below the level of... Okay, I'm going to simplify it and call it God, but there is a lot more complexity that's kind of going on here. I don't know enough about Kabbalah to properly explain it. I'm sure there are plenty of other people on YouTube who could, but we're just gonna take it easy. Gonna make it simple. A level below God. Later in the series, Atziluth would become known as Makai, or the Expanse, the home of the demons. Much like its presentation here, the Expanse exists in between the material and spiritual worlds, simplifying the four-world structure dramatically. That said, Kabbalah is not the only influence on the layout of this universe. Izanami and Yumiko spend a good portion of the book in Yomi, the Japanese underworld, and references exist to both the events of Egyptian mythology and the pantheon created by H.P. Lovecraft. This kitchen sink of mythologies is very similar to the world we would go on to see in future Megami Tensei games, and honestly is one of the many reasons why I love this series so much. The main villain of the novel is Set, the Egyptian god of desert, storms, and chaos. That said, while he is given the name of Set, it seems to me like he takes a lot more influence from Apophis, the Serpent of Chaos. The two are actually enemies in myth, despite both being linked to chaos, as it is actually Set's job in the mythology to defend the sun god from the primordial serpent. That said, he still went through the same mythological events as Set did, with reference being made to Set slaying his brother Osiris, which is the myth most people would associate with him. I'll do a deeper dive on him sometime before my next main video on the series. The book also introduces a couple more major characters, the most important of which being the Feed brothers, Charles and Isma. They are both American magicians of Mayan descent, though the two took very different paths with their magic. Charles became a professor at MIT, trying to use magic to push forward human abilities in science, while Isma, also known by his followers as the Saint, used his powers to try and conquer the human world. He'd actually been working for years on creating his own demon summoning program, though he wasn't able to finish it before Nakajima managed to summon Loki in the first book. Nakajima hypothesized that Japan simply had a better natural setting for summoning demons than America, but we don't really get confirmation if that's the case or not. Moving on to the main story, the book opens a week after the death of Loki at the hands of Nakajima. During that time, Nakajima and Yumiko's entire class had mysteriously vanished. Ohara, the teacher who became Loki's devoted servant, accidentally summoned Set to the material world while attempting to contact her deceased master. Nakajima and Yumiko had been separated, with Yumiko joining Izanami and Yoma to learn magic, and Nakajima hanging on in the spiritual world, lamenting his separation from Yumiko, until he was finally sent home to be with his mother. Before the first book, Nakajima and his mother had become all but estranged, despite living in the same apartment. However, after the scarring events of the last week, and the ensuing separation, the two began to rebuild their relationship. Akemi, previously aloof and without close relationships, was beginning to reconnect with the world and see other people as just that, people. And forming this bond with his mother was symbolic of that shift. After hearing of the events of the first novel, both brothers Feed independently traveled to Japan. Professor Feed would meet Nakajima and form the Demon Banishment Project, a group affiliated with the Japanese government that seeked to prevent the Loki incident from reoccurring and creating a program called the Demon Banishment Program, a companion to Nakajima's demon summoning program that would send demons back from whence they came. The third member of the project was an absolute badass of a Japanese special forces agent named Narukawa. Narukawa is every bit the stoic martial artist you'd expect in an 80s action film, with a small frame that hides his immense skill. Narukawa immediately feels a close bond with Nakajima, because he too is the reincarnation of a Japanese god, Tsukiyomi, the Japanese god of the moon and son of Izanagi. On the other hand, Saint Feed would find and kidnap Ohara, who was both in contact with Set and pregnant with Loki's demonic child. Deep in a forest outside the city of Musashino, he began improving Nakajima's summoning program, trying to use it to summon Set, a demon far more powerful than Loki, to the mortal realm and form a pact with him. He would also summon a number of smaller demons that served Set, called Apeps, that could replace a human's nervous system and control their bodies until the host finally expired. He would begin using these Apeps to control various politicians and protect his summoning project. Upon learning of Nakajima's return, Isma sent Ohara to draw him out and kill him. She decided to do so by attacking both protagonists' families, first slaughtering the Shirsagis, and then using an Apep to possess Mrs. Nakajima. During this time, affected by the demonic energy inside of her, Ohara would have become a demon herself, though the description listed in the book doesn't really describe any of the known demons I can think of. If all of this rings any bells for you, then let me know. That said, her transformation says a lot about demons. She's not only the only person in this story to turn into a demon, nor is she the first. Remember, later in the series, demons and gods become indistinguishable, so arguably Yumiko and Nakajima taking on their godly powers could be seen as a way of transforming into a demon, something the book goes into detail about with Nakajima later. Later games of the series also blur the line between human and demon. There are recruitable human allies in SMT2 that can be fused with demons to create exclusive demons. Strange Journey brings this up as well with Jimenez, and a mix between human and demon is the definition of demi-fiend, and can be instrumental in the creation of a Nahabino. Hazuma turned himself into a demonic king. Digital Devil Saga happened. Honestly, the relationship between humans and demons is a major focus of this entire series. Back to the story, the shock of her family's death caused Yumiko to return to the human world, cutting her training short. She went to the Nakajima residence just in time to save Akemi from being murdered by his possessed mother, which, weirdly enough, would kind of become a trope in the Megami Tensei franchise. However, in protecting Akemi, Yumiko accidentally killed his mother, leading to her fleeing the scene out of shock and guilt. This allowed her to be captured by Saint Feed, who used the high amounts of magnetite in Yumiko's body to stabilize his new, more powerful demon summoning program. By capturing Yumiko and using her body as a conduit, as well as Ohara's unborn child as a vessel, Set was finally able to take form in the human world, though only as a weird amoeba-like creature rather than his true form. He hoped to summon his true form and his legion of demons by creating a permanent gateway from his world to Earth. To properly use Yumiko's body, he wound up crucifying her on an Ankh. To power that gate, Set needed more magnetite than even Yumiko could provide, so Saint Feed began using the power he received from Set to mesmerize the locals. These mesmerized people would then sacrifice themselves to Set, letting their biological magnetite be absorbed into his body and turning them into demons. At first, they pulled from the nearby city of Musashino, but as time went on, cities dried up and Set's power only grew. This meant that the sacrifices would start coming from further and further away. By the end of the story, over 40,000 citizens of Tokyo Prefecture would be sacrificed to Set's demonic appetite. The Japanese government, under the control of Set's Apeps, kept the disappearances out of the public eye, though it eventually became an open secret, as that many people disappearing really can't be kept under wraps. As Set's power grew, his miasma changed the landscape around him, first creating a thick fog that obscured his activity, but then merging the area around him with the expanse, turning Musashino into the titular Demon City. This transformation allowed more and more powerful demons to come to Earth, including Set's most powerful serpentine servant, Typhon, named for the most powerful monster in Greek mythology. Despite being from different pantheons, Typhon was likely chosen due to his connection with serpents, an association that he shares with this version of Set. By the time the Demon Banishment team had found where Set was hiding, the Apeps had gotten deep enough into the Japanese government to shut down their project. The three traveled to Musashino, where they confronted Set. They managed to kill Typhon, and as a result, Saint Feed as well, whose body had been fused with Typhon's by Set's magic. Despite managing to take down the Serpent, however, they were no match for Set himself. In order to help his friends escape, Narukawa awakened as a reincarnation of Tsukiyomi. Even with all the added power of the moon backing him up, Narukawa needed to sacrifice his life so Ukemi and Professor Feed could live to fight Professor Feed decided that allowing Set to remain on Earth was far too dangerous, and came up with the idea of forcefully summoning him to a satellite orbiting the Earth. Nakajima, however, didn't support this idea, as it would mean that Yumiko would likely go along with him. The two split up, with Professor Feed approaching the US government to get permission to use the satellite, and Nakajima seeking help from Izanami. She granted him Izanagi's robe, a powerful artifact carrying the soul of Nakajima's previous life. However, by giving this to him, Izanami lost her connection to the material realm, but was no longer able to manifest there or possess Yumiko. The book goes on an interesting tangent here, talking about how Nakajima was beginning to become like the gods of legend, despite his desire not to. His selfish desire to protect the love of his life, possibly at the expense of the entire population of the Earth, is exactly the kind of thing that a god would do. The god within was rubbing off on him, and was also beginning to take him over. Upon wearing the robe, Nakajima himself began transforming into a god, taking on the powers that Izanagi once had available to him in life. With this new power in hand, Nakajima once again attacked Set, which only ended with Nakajima joining Yumiko and Set and being transported to the satellite by Professor Feed. Space turned out to be an ideal location for summoning demons, with a lack of other powerful magnetic or gravitational fields to dilute the demon's data, allowing Set to fully manifest on the satellite, in the form of a large snake. The door that opened to the expanse was so strong that a number of other demons who served Set were dragged there alongside him, creating a veritable invasion force. Set and Nakajima would then have an epic space battle, with Nakajima able to fly through space using the power of the cloak, and using the Hinokagasuchi sword to fight the demon. Eventually, a coordinated attack between Nakajima and Yumiko, who was still barely hanging on inside the demon, managed to fell the beast, and the two lovers were finally reunited. The book ends here, leaving us to wonder what exactly will happen next. And the answer is, there are two answers. After this book, the timeline kind of splits, with one direction going towards the other 7 books written by Nishitani in the series, and the other direction going towards the original game created by Atlus on the NES, the first Megami Tensei game. At some point, I will cover both of these stories. However, it may be sometime before I cover the book. Nishitani is actually working right now on creating an official translation of this. Hey, Editor Goblin here, I'm just kind of popping in. While I was editing this part, I went back to check Nishitani's Twitter, and actually it looks like he has actually finished the translation of Book 3. So, maybe that won't take quite as long as I thought to actually get to it. So that's really exciting, just want to let everyone know. I will link the translation to both Books 2 and 3 in the description, in case you guys want to see it. But this also gives me a chance to shout out Masakado, the Mega 10 fan who did the translations of the first 2 books. Due to the recognition by Nishitani himself, they may as well be the official translations of the first 2 books. Masakado's blog, which features the translated text of the first 2 books, can be found in the description. And the next time that the Deepest Lore series covers Megami Tensei will be Megami Tensei for the NES, the first Atlus game. This will specifically be the Kyoku version, which is a remake that was on the SNES. So if you want to play it ahead of time, then there you go, now's your time to start. I will warn you, it's really rough, even for an RPG that came out in that era. Honestly, it took me a couple of false starts before I finally managed to get a groove with the game and really start to enjoy it. But eventually I did, and I'm really happy that I played it. But I'm going to let you guys go. I've held you for long enough. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.